गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट। गना शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। Today we're going to talk of India, USA and Trump's NSS. But before that, on behalf of all of us in Gana Shot, I'd like to wish you a very, very happy new year and hope that 2026 gives you what you all want. And hope all success for all of you. And to discuss this business of India, US, and Trump's NSS, I have with me Brigadier Arun Sahgal. Sir, good evening and welcome. This is the last show for this year, and I thought you must feature on it. And grateful that you're here. And before we go further, a happy new year to you also.
To you also, to Ganesh, like you have said, and I'm honored to be the last person on your show
Sir,
before the next year. Thank you
yes,
very much for this honor, sir.
and thanks a lot, sir, because you educated all of us quite a bit. And I thought we'll take India and US and the Trump NSS, which has recently come up. We'll talk about that. And the reason is very simple. It was said that the India-US relationship, it started, as we all know, it started taking off in about 2000 at the turn of the century. And somewhere around after 9/11, things started, America started realizing that, look, they can't, Pakistan is no partner or reliable. And by then they started getting the view that they need a counterweight against China and they need someone else more stable in Asia to forge a relationship with. And that's when this relationship started. In the initial years of this relationship, it was felt, and justifiably so, that this was the relationship which will define the 21st century. Not the India China relationship, not the US China relationship, India US. And this was said by two successive presidents on that side and prime ministers on this side. Things were going well. In fact, things were going very well till the beginning of this, till April this year. Suddenly, things took a turn. Uh, Call it Opsindur effect, call it the Pakistan effect, call it the China effect, call it the Trump effect, call it USA effect. Many issues. And ever since then, the India-US strategic partnership has been derailed completely. Let's face facts. We have a relationship with USA, and that relationship remains deep because of defense and things like that. But is it strategic in nature? The way it was conceived is anybody's guess. There are times when people like their defense minister Hexeth and Rubio, they talk of India being a very critical partner for them in the Indo-Pacific and things like that. But how much of it is just rhetoric? How much of it is lip service? Or what they mean is a thing. On the other hand, tariffs. We along with Brazil, are the crown kings of 50% tariffs. A deal with them has not gone through, and many issues have come in between. And of course, Pakistan has played its hand, uh, right? Amplified by a few other factors. Uh, have they played on Mr. Trump's vanity? Possibly. Have they played on his weakness? Possibly. Has Trump played on his own weakness towards India or blind spot on India? Possible. So many things are there in this equation. But today, this equation stands in shattered, if I may say so. And what's worse is that things are getting, from a government to government relationship, country to country relationship, it's now hitting the Indian diaspora, which is there, which is quite prosperous. The diaspora there is coming under, some form of I wouldn't say attack, but definitely under some stress. And counter to that, there are a lot of people from USA investing into India. I was just talking to Brigadier Arun Sahgal about it. Apart from the biggies like Microsoft and Apple and Intel, many others are investing in India, and the planned investment, planned investment into India, uh, as I saw in a report, is about $67 billion, and planned. It is not unplanned, and this has to come within the next 3-4 years max, because that's the time it takes for $67 billion plan to go on road and get absorbed and get executed, and things happening. In the next 4 5 years, you'll see the a whole big change in the Indian economic scene. It's very axiomatically, it is USA which will pump prime India. Make no mistake about it. Investment into India will pump prime India. At the same time, it is USA which is derailing this their own strategic partnership. On our side, we have been quite uh, patient about it. We have not. We've been, I wouldn't say subdued, but we've been restrained about the whole affair. Right? That's what it is from a India-US uh, point of view. But look at it from a global point of view. Things are changing at pace. China is struggling. Russia has still not got out of the Ukraine war. In any case, the Russian economy has severe limitations, right? It doesn't give you an alternative to USA. We are deeply embedded with USA, and we are trying to explore things with EU from our perspective. But overall, things are changing at pace. Now, this change at pace between the China, USA, China, EU, USA, EU, right? USA, Latin America, things are moving. Just to give you an idea, if you think we are in a problem, 2 days back, uh, there was a park in Panama where there was an old statue, 150-year-old statue of China, which was broken down by a bulldozer. And Panama and China had very deep relations, and very clearly, all this was the, I wouldn't say the force behind it, but the backing for the Panaman government to do something like that has come from USA. That's part of Mr. Trump's Latin American policy, right? So I'm giving you a long-winded thing because you have to understand what Brigadier Sahgal is going to tell you. It is in this global context and the India US context that Mr. Trump has come out with a new NSS. The new national security strategy of Mr. Trump upends the old order or the old thought of USA. If there is something if you can put it in forward, it's trying to make America great again, or trying to make America secure again, whichever way you look at it. And we need to understand this. Prima facie, you read it, it's very simple. But what are the layers in this? What are the complexities in this? And what does it hold for India is the issue which I really am looking forward to. And there are very few people who can explain this to us. And one of them is sitting just next to us, in front of you, in fact. So I'll defer the floor to him, sir. Sorry for this long winded introduction.
No, no, no. Ideal, sir. This is the ideal stage setting. So, okay, thank you very much for the floor. And on this last day of the year, I also wish all your listeners and your huge fan following a happy new year tomorrow. Today, we're going to be discussing an important topic. This topic has been the focus of attention for the better part of the latter 2025. And in December, the American administration have come out with the new NSS. So, what does this NSS means? What does it hold? What is this NSS all about? We will be discussing this. We'll also discuss the major components of the NSS. We'll discuss the India factor, implicit and perceived, and we'll also look at the reality check. What does it actually means in terms of Indo-US relationship? Something which the general alluded to. First and foremost, we have to understand is this 2025 US NSS encapsulates changing global dynamics and their impact on the current US administration's strategic thinking. Why is this change? What has changed? There is a realization in terms of two dynamics at play in American thinking. One are the geopolitical factors and other are the structural factors. Coming to the geopolitical factors, Americans realize the recent conflicts, the ability of the US power, and the way the global power balance is playing out is questioning the US unipolarity. US no longer remains the power that it can dictate the global order in terms that it thought it could dictate. It is being challenged at multiple places. Ukraine war is one factor which is making Americans rethink. At one level, the famed attempt by the American president to resolve the conflict and bring about peace reconciliation, that has not taken place. On the other hand, what has happened is the sanctions have not worked. It is pushing Russia-China economic and technological equations even more closer. Only yesterday, there was a report which came out that in retaliation to $102 billion, which have been reserved from the seized Russian funds, the Russians have nationalized assets of the European companies to the tune of $120 billion. It's not only the assets which have been here, they've taken away entire supply chains of those companies. These are Siemens uh, and other major companies which are operating in Russia. So the bottom line, the sanctions are not working. Putin is suffering, but he is not suffering enough from the American perspective and is continuing with his operations. NATO is not delivering. In backdrop of this, there are structural factors. What are the structural factors? There is anxiety over declining economic, military, and technological strength. Americans are realizing how closely, by the world order, in terms of the First Cold War, there was an ideological challenge between the United States and Russia, and erstwhile Soviet Union. But this challenge from Russia is operating in the same global geo-economic system. So, in this, which the United States is dependent on trade, the United States is dependent on Chinese technologies, and its United States is concerned about a growing military capabilities. I.e., China is becoming a military technological contender and with its control of supply chains, it's becoming a global player, which the Americans are finding difficult to control. Next issue is, like I said, is the economic and political realities at home. Jobs are not there. When you have a contested relationship in terms of trade, you are not getting the supplies at the kind of cheap supplies from sweatshops of China and other global supply chains. You are trying to build up your own capacity as a home. It's going to take time. So you come up with this tariff narrative. What is the tariff narrative? Impose tariffs on friends and partners and all the others so that you make those supplies expensive, from global supplies expensive, and try to build up capacities at home. But all this takes time, and you have to have both in terms of manpower, resources, and the capabilities, technological capabilities. That is something which the American president, after 1 year, is realizing is not going to happen in a jiffy, and it's going to take time. So, in this backdrop, what does the NSS talk about? The NSS talks about is America First framework, which subordinates US foreign policy to domestic revitalization, national sovereignty, and looking at border controls as a primary security, because it believes that the foreigners are coming in, immigration is taking place, and is taking away the American jobs. To that extent, this NSS narrows down US engagement to issues that directly affect core US national interests, downgrading its earlier avatar of expansive globalist and value-driven interventions. I basically means is that this NSS explicitly says America will not be the global policeman. It will not intervene in all conflicts into or any all those areas where its intervention will be only interest based where its interests are involved. Second, economics is the new security parameter. It is looking at economic independence, reindustrialization, balanced trade, and energy dominance as its core way to national security priorities or national security domination rather than military capacities. It underplays military vis-a-vis the economic independence and reindustrialization. The tariff, reshoring, nearshoring, tighter investment, and export controls are the means it says it will employ, particularly against countries like China and India, and China primarily for its critical technologies, to ensure that Americans are not left out, or and the America or to and to also undermine the Chinese dominance in this area. Then there is this whole issue of shift from global posture to homeland security. Basically, the Americans are starting thinking is that they are vulnerable at home. The homeland defense has been neglected, and they are also come up with the new doctrine. I mean, they have brought back the Monroe Doctrine style of primacy in the Western Hemisphere, essentially to ensure that the extra hemispheric intentions, primarily of the Chinese, are controlled. What is happening is this is something which we need to understand is China is making major inroads into South America. China is making major inroads into Mexico. It is making major inroads into Canada. It is also making inroads into United States. So the bottom line is the whole idea of a Western hemispheric oriented pivot is to ensure that these pivots are being controlled and managed to ensure that they do not undermine United States security. And in this case, like I go back, the security is no longer in terms of security, but in terms of economic and trade security. It also has an important chapter on military power and deterrence. It looks at military power from the perspective of peace through strength. It is centered on maintaining overwhelming military capability and a modernized nuclear triad. Towards this, it is willing to invest hugely, as you have seen. The latest American defense budget is $900 billion. And these investments are in advanced technologies, which includes AI, autonomous systems, long-range strike. The whole idea being to raise deterrence while avoiding protracted occupations. On China and India Pacific and alliances, the NSS talks about China as a main principal strategic competitor, but there's a shift from 2017 to the 2025. The shift entirely is that in 2027 it was a strategic competitor, a military competitor who had to be contested and contained, but now it being looked as an economic and a technological competitor, and who has to be managed, but not through open-ended military containment, but through trade, technology, and other measures of denial and deterrence. It is it has got a very interesting focus on its allies. It expects its allies to do greater burden sharing and self-reliance. Focus Europe and Indo-Pacific partners. It is it is wanting selective interest-based coalitions rather than broad value-centric alliances missions. Basically, what it means is selective interest-based coalitions mean is that those coalitions that further United States security interests are the ones that Americans are willing to invest in, not across the board alliances. I mean, they just don't want to be part of any partnership which does not provide any value to the Americans. Like, for example, the quadrilaterals, the bilaterals, the trilaterals, which were all being thought about. AUKUS, for example, AUKUS is like under question for these days, because what is the value of AUKUS if it is not going to materialize before 2040? Now, as far as the strategic deterrence is concerned, deterrence is defined as preventing war by ensuring and no adversary can credibly hold the U.S. homeland at risk with strength, military, and economic. Now, please note the fact the deterrence is being looked upon from two elements, both military and economic. So, as far as the military is concerned, the whole notion is creating overwhelming military capabilities along with fortified borders and creating a credible economic power. So when you look at the tariff policy, you look at the trade policies, look at the way Trump is arm twisting countries like Japan and Korea for investing in United States, how it is making Taiwan to invest in chips in United States. The whole notion should be very clear to us. The whole idea is sanctions, trade barriers, force investment into America. Idea being ensure credible economic power returns back to America. So the whole deterrence is therefore looked upon as sustaining economic vitality while trying to create industrial power and integrating that industrial power with its military means. As far as missile defense is concerned, it is modernizing its nuclear deterrent, emphasizing on direct, and this new program is a $1.1 trillion program which will upgrade its existing old missile capabilities, deploy new weapon systems, and now create even is thinking of creating a space-based nuclear assets. It is it is visualizing, taking a cue from the Israelis, a homeland missile defense vision, including a golden dome, which is golden dome is a very integrated and a very interesting and a technologically high funda aspect, something akin to President Reagan's Star Wars. It is going to have about hundreds of small satellites, all integrated, so and all will be able to work in, like it will be like what would be called as a satellite swarm in the space, all integrated and able to do the same task of defense and offense from space. In terms of its conventional force posture is concerned, like I said, it wants to create a technologically advanced joint forces, but its interesting part is, and this is very important part, is while it is trying to create a high-end deterrence and standoff capabilities for itself and for its employment, the mass of the regional presence, which basically means while the technological capacities to its reliance to its allies and partners will be provided by the United States, but the manpower, the fodder, the body bags will have to come from the allies. The allies will be asked to provide those body bags, be it in Indo-Pacific, be it in Europe, be it in Middle East. So this is an important construct of this NSS. In terms of geographical rebalancing, it is readjusting its threats and posture towards Western Hemisphere, which we talked about. And as far as Indo-Pacific is concerned, the deterrence is focused entirely on maintaining a favorable military balance and the first island chain and preventing conflict over Taiwan. Bottom line, the posture is not to take on in a conflict situation China, but to deter China for taking on any steps that changes the future of Taiwan. And in this also, there is a strong expectation for allied burden sharing and limiting US willingness for a protected campaign. So, with this, the overall thinking is in terms of burden sharing with allies, and this is an important practice, that US will provide nuclear deterrence, key enablers, high-end capabilities, while the allies will be expected to generate conventional mass and the frontline posture. You will fight on the front lines, you will provide the conventional forces, you will do the fighting on the ground, while the United States will provide you with technological capabilities. So it is a major shift from global force provider to orchestrator using selective forward presence, economic leverages, and allied capability to sustain deterrence at lower direct US operational costs. And this is very important, at lower direct US operational costs. So with this I finished the NSS part before I shift to the Indian aspects of the NSS and Indo-US relations. If there are any issues or questions which the general would like to ask me to clarify or speak more about.
Yes, sir. I just want to highlight one issue. While everyone talks about, that he's looking hereafter into his own hemisphere, his backyard, and Latin America and the Western Hemisphere, and in the rest of the world, he's going to have I would say, a backup kind of a role. That's what emerges out of this whole thing. An issue which is playing out and which people have to understand is the pressure which USA is putting on China in America or Americas, North and South America, sooner or later is going to affect others. It's like a balloon. You press a balloon in one place, it'll come up the other. The whole story is in a balance of enthalpy. So, right, you put pressure here, it'll go there. You put pressure there, it'll come back here. So it's just that Mr. Trump has changed the pressure points. The objects of his pressure still remain the same. It's just that the instruments of pressure on China have changed, right? But the fundamentals of that, pressure have not changed. It's not as if he's saying, all his allies like Japan, Taiwan and all. No, you're going to do the fighting. Fine, they'll do the fighting. But till then, what? It's not as if he's stepping away from it. And if you see what's going on today in Taiwan and in, with Japan, actually the Trump NSS is being put to test there already. What's going to happen in Japan and what's going to happen in Taiwan is going to have a lot of ripple effect. One thing I'd like to highlight, before the Trump NSS came out and before Sanai Takachi became the Prime Minister of Japan, there was no talk of Japan going nuclear. Today, there is talk of Japan trying to go nuclear, and today China, and which I discussed in the morning with all of you, China has said that within 3 years, Japan can go nuclear, if it wants. Now, these are the issues which are going to come out of this NSS, willy-nilly. If those things happen, like I said, the pressure shift somewhere, the pressure point shift somewhere, effects are going to be different with something which we are not used to. So to some extent, to a large extent, whatever Mr. Trump has done so far or is doing so far, or as far as his hemispheric strategy, make America great again, his Monroe Doctrine is concerned, is going to have effects elsewhere. That's the first point. We're going to talk of India, but let me trip it. Already, India is thinking very seriously that it needs to have its own Monroe Doctrine. If the global policeman is not going to be around, someone has to police. Otherwise, this whole place will be like Bangladesh. No one in control. So there are going to be second order effects of this doctrine, which we'll need to understand, right? And I just thought I'll elucidate it. So your views on what I've said, because they are a little hatke from what probably is there in public domain. And then we could go ahead with the India aspect.
Sir, your views are absolutely valid, and once you hear me out on my second part, you will realize that I am echoing what you are saying.
Thank you, sir.
So,
We'll go ahead then with the second part.
okay. So now I come to this crucial issue which General Shankar also raised during his opening remarks is the shift in India's salience. Uh, he highlighted the fact that we were strategic partner of choice in post-Cold War, and at that time it must be remembered that it was more of American requirement equally as India's, particularly in the fact that the Soviet Union had collapsed, world was in disorder, and there was this huge China challenge emerging out. So it was not altruism as people talk about. It was by strategic necessity of that particular time point in time that the Americans looked at India, and of course India sought to befriend US uh, in terms to meet its own security, technology, and investment challenges in the change balance of power. So it led to re-energization of Quad, growing economy, nuclear military power, strong technological and economic base, and power potential were the key components which were the drivers of this relationship. But the question comes about is, and also one more factor, because of India's strategic importance till 2024, 20, and India's relationship with China and Russia as part of security calculus, I mean, the SCOs and BRICS and all were all accepted, primarily because it was felt within the American Western camp that India is too important to be allowed to go completely in one way or the other away from the Western camp. But the what we are seeing today in terms of the U.S. relationship with India and its the way it is being shaped, there appears to be that there has been an important determination that India's salience in meeting in U.S. core strategic interests has diminished. These have been sorry,
No, that's okay, sir.
it has been diminished, particularly in regard to meeting U.S. strategic interests. The India's power equations and multi-alignments are seen as inimical to U.S. interests, and there are tensions over trade and service as a corollary. Consequently, Indo-Pacific realignments, trade, and tariff immigrations are part and parcel of the coercive strategy. That's the general perception. Now, let's look at closely at India in the NSS. India's reference, although limited, but is functional in functional terms, is huge. It looks as commercial ties, quad cooperation, sea lane security, critical minerals, and a co-ship in terms of practical meaning of India's role in the region, rather than in terms of abstract role of a co-shaper of global order, uh, etc., which was generally being played around in the 2017 NSS. Uh, It has also shifted about a convenience partner important to US China strategy, but not central to Washington's overall grand design. But this is important. This is what the general was also talking about. India remains important to US China strategy, but may not be at this particular time central to Washington's overall grand design. Therefore, there are no treaty style obligations for India which are being signaled, but a huge amount of functional expectations in terms of security contributions, deeper economic alignments, and tighter participation in US led Pacific architecture are nuanced and talked about, and I'll just highlight some of them. Security and quad-related expectations. NSS, while explicitly urges continued quadrilateral cooperation with US, Japan, and Australia, is in effect is asking India to sustain and deepen its role in the Quad as a maritime security multiplier and counterweight to China. It is expecting India to contribute more to Indo Pacific security by expanding defense cooperation, domain awareness, and naval coordination, particularly in keeping sea lanes open and raising the cost of Chinese coercion from the Indian Ocean, which is implied as something which is going to happen this year or next year as the Chinese start deploying two aircraft carriers simultaneously, etc., and what they call march to westwards in the Indian Ocean. In in terms of in terms of burden sharing, the NSS expects to partner India to step up its defense efforts and translate these into higher capability investments and larger role in regional security, but has fallen shy of couching it in some kind of an alliance language, primarily to meet India's sensibilities. The text is cautious. It reads, implicit ask for greater interoperability, more regular exercises, and selective access and coordination in the Indian Ocean and adjacent waters to support collective deterrence, especially against Chinese naval expansion. Now, please note the word. The idea basically is that India is not being thrown under the bus. India remains an important player, but the aspect of where India's critical role comes is on the important gateways like the Malacca Straits and the sea lines of communication, and also in areas where the Americans have very little presence in Indian Ocean, is where the NSS highlighting India's role. The implicit expectations are burden sharing and revitalization of allied industries. The While there is no direct reference to Indian systems, submarines, carriers, or vessels, the suggestions include coordination and logistics as areas where US technology sharing can support Indian expansion. Now, this is an implied this thing. What are the interpretation? Expect Indian investments in long-range precision fires, drones, systems, C5 ISR, and blue water naval assets to fill US capacity gaps in northern Indian Ocean and NSS. It is in these areas the United States is willing to scale up Indian indigenous production, support it, and include it with technological capacities and capabilities, all to be discussed, uh, agreed upon, including, sadly, is export control alignments for deeper technology access. So it's not coming free, it's coming, but Americans are willing to look at technological capacity building for India on the basis that India requires them and for it to play a stronger role in the Indian Ocean region and also expand it to the first island chain should the situation so demand. Maritime domain awareness and surveillance. It is looking at enhanced real maritime intelligence sharing and surveillance networks, particularly to deal with the Chinese naval expansion and secure slocks, with India expected to play a lead Indian Ocean war via Quad mechanisms and joint fusion centers. Therefore, investments in space-based ISR, uncrewed systems, C5ISR, etc., are integral to this picture building and response to gray zone scenarios. In all these areas, the Americans are wanting to be indicating to be a willing partner. The next area is naval presence and power projection. The strategy implies Indian forward deployment and sustained operations in choke points like Malacca Straits and Andaman Sea, prioritizing blue water assets for deterrence and freedom of navigation. and expansion of its carrier strike group, destroyers, and submarine force. Interoperability and force multipliers, quad focus, anti ship missiles, mine, long range precision fires, autonomous vessels are all highlighted as needed for an integrated denial against Chinese aggression, with US technology access tied to the Indian scaling. In terms of Indo Pacific and China competition, the NSS asks India to improve commercial relationship with India so that New Delhi can contribute more to Indo-Pacific security, explicitly citing continued Quad cooperation and joint efforts to keep sea lanes, including South China Sea. So here is an important aspect that the Americans would ask and expect a military role for Quad, something that we have been shying away from. And this is an area that's going to become a critical aspect of our relationship going forward. So, it is in fact pushing India for a larger share of deterrence burden against China, from Indian Ocean slot security to participation in coalition response to Chinese attempt to restrict maritime traffic. The whole idea being is they are front ending India in this discourse, while Americans are clear that they will play a background role and limit its own forward presence. There is a perceptual shift in thinking which is coming out of the NSS is that India as a strong maritime power, capable maritime power, can hold forth and deploy and contribute to security of sea lines and communications starting from the West Asia or the Persian Gulf right up to the South China Sea, that is and along the critical straits. This is what the whole subgenes of American thinking which is emerging. Another area is geoeconomics and critical minerals. India is being included in part of coalition which is required to be looking at critical minerals. And here against this, the India's operations requirement as a part of the coalition in critical minerals is important development. But please note, this entire critical minerals concert or a coalition is built on for ensuring critical minerals in Western Hemisphere and Africa. These are critical minerals required for Western Hemisphere. This is important thing. While it does provide us with the capital, technology, and markets, but it also pressurizes India to align export controls and supply chain choices in investment only towards US-oriented interests, pushing us away from our relationship in these areas with China or Russia. Another area is space autonomy and defense and industrial issues. Space is becoming an important issue. They want us to be partners with it, but again, it that there are areas that while we look at space and defense industrial issues, there are potential friction areas in terms of engine technology, chips, dual use export, as the US repatriates high end manufacturing and may become more restrictive on sharing critical equipment with India compared to our expectations. Bottom line, uh, the joint production of 404, chip technology, critical areas in cyber, in critical areas in precision strikes, critical areas in other systems which are required by us, we might find the Americans falling short of our expectation. Uh, So, as bottom line is, as US raises the risk of a bolder China forest in Southern Asia and the Indian Ocean, it is compelling India to carry more of the stabilization and deterrence load in the region with little or no American backing. But yes, it is expecting India to develop capacities and capabilities to deal with this. So, What this transpires into, if you read these elements and try to interpret it the way I have tried to do, is there is an acknowledgement of India's strategic importance, its economic and military powers, but United States will now do it on the basis of its interest being resolved, its interest being managed. What does that mean for India? What expectations can we have from India? Or is it being done as a part of a rent seeker? This is something which the India will have to negotiate very closely with the Americans as we move forward. The bottom line basically is, as we are uh, trying to understand Indo-US relationships on the eve of this 2020-25, is the fact is how far are the Americans going to move forward to meet our India's expectations in all these areas, be it technology, be it trade, be it India's security interests? Will it do the kind of give us the kind of support in certain contingencies? India is not asking for it, but in certain contingencies where we see a collusion between Pakistan and China, as it manifested in the Ops and Do time in May this year, what will America do for India? It's not what America will do for India. What is the level of strategic partnership we can expect from the Americans in such events? Number two, what is the trade to say, how far is the Americans are going to go to continue with these trade sanctions the way they have done it? Do they at some stage realize the India's role as a strategic partners requires a more balanced approach to trade, tariff, and supply chain management, and in cost or technological sharing? I'll stop here and I'll await your comments and
Thank you, sir.
questions.
Thanks a lot, sir. So, what comes out of all this is, a couple of things. Uh, yeah. The point is that willy nilly, and this has been borne by fact over the past 1 year, USA is expecting a lot from India without giving anything to India, without giving the reassurance to India. That's the first thing. The second thing, we in India have to start thinking of. So, what do we get in return from whatever we give them, whatever they have to give us, or they demand from us? That's the first thing. And the answer to that is India has to be transactional. India should be clear to tell America what do you want from them. Otherwise, we will be, there's no relationship. Because, like I said in the beginning, this relationship at this point of time lies shattered. There are no guarantees on both sides. And this is despite the fact that we've revived a 10-year defense. It's not a defense pact, a defense agreement, just about 3 months back. And despite the fact that our army has carried out bilateral exercises, or Air Force has carried out exercises, we are just rolling forward what's happened earlier with no guarantees ahead. Is that a good thing to go forward? Is a question mark. How much do all these issues get linked with the geoeconomics and the trade and things like that? Is also something which is we are not clear about. If you give all this, what USA wants, will other issues get sorted out? Is a big question mark with us. Second, it was not expected that Pak, China, and USA will collaborate with each other in a direct or an indirect way prior to Op Sindoor. What happened in Op Sindoor, if you look at the aftermath of Op Sindoor, they have collaborated maybe not on a triangular basis, but on a bilateral basis, one-to-one, right? And it was not in the interest of all three of them at that point of time and beyond to allow India to, do what it wanted or go beyond a level. And that's why the pressure started coming, which is very clear by now, coming within the second day of from more mainly from America to for us to take the step, to take the foot off the gas pedal. So I think these are issues which for which in the future we don't have a guarantee yet. This is the and these reasons inhibit us from reviving a relationship, which actually might be might be working against us, because if you see it in perspective, we have not got anything from USA, which is of note. I said, 5 set, all that has gone for a toss. Technology transfer, nothing. Even those engines for which we have paid is coming in trickles. So there are no guarantees from USA. So should we invest in USA? That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is you are already invested in USA. Your complete strategic airlift is from USA. If you have to keep maintaining that, and that's a thing which is a outflow of 25 years of a relationship. It will go in for the next 25 years. So you can't ditch the USA. What? That's the first part of the story. The flip. The second is, look, we all know our difficult environment in Bangladesh is fundamentally again a set of actions willy-nilly, not in concert, but have happened in concert between Pakistan, China, and USA. I mean, that's an open secret anyway. So, is there a case of pulling USA out of this deal in Bangladesh by offering them a sop elsewhere in the form of cod, right? Which means if when USA takes its foot off the Bangladesh pedal, which at this point of time is quite loose, mind you, and then we start controlling the Bangladesh situation. We need to. So these are the things which we have to see, because I think principally if Bangladesh is under control, a lot of stability will come into our neighborhood, and we'll be able to handle Pakistan for whatever it is. And of course, the strange relationship between USA and Pakistan, which has developed, we don't know. We don't know if which way it is going. We just came to know that Munir's daughter has been married to his brother's son or something like that. Something like that might be happening between Trump also. So we don't know. We don't know, because people went and had a meal of him. So we don't know. So a lot of imponderables. The whole story is that it creates a sense of ambiguity, strategic ambiguity for India. Now, how do you navigate the strategic ambiguity in India is the question. And this is what will be our challenge as we go ahead into 2025. So, I mean, at this point of time, I don't have answers for any of this, except for the fact you'll have to let some time pass before certain answers start coming out. Because, like I said earlier, there are new problems coming up because of all this. The Indo-Pacific situation, it's not, after all, America is not playing this game unilaterally. There is also China involved, there's also Japan involved, there's Philippines involved, there's Taiwan involved. They're playing their own reactionary games or proactive games, and things are happening. We also have our bilateral relationships and everything going. So there is a set of equations which we have to deal with, and you have Russia to not you can't forget Russia either. So a whole lot of things are happening, and as we are speaking, there's a game-changing event happening in Iran. Iran is up in problems. People are out on the streets. We don't know where this will go, and if Iran goes, bonkers, we don't know how this whole game will change automatically. Many things which the some Trump's national security strategy lays down are subject to events happening or not happening. We don't know how they're going to happen. But these are the realities. Like I said earlier, if USA puts pressure on, in the Americas, a certain amount of reaction will happen on our hemisphere also. And that I don't think has played out. So let's focus. All at this point of time, as we end 2025, all we can say is Of course, one point, important point. All this has been blown up by the human resource issues which have come up in terms of migration and diaspora, all that. Now, if you want to be a good boy with USA, will those pressures go off? It's a question point, a moot point, right? Whether you are a good boy with USA or not, the US investment is coming. They have no choice. Like I said, I've been saying always, in terms of scale and skill, there is no alternative to India. The world needs India. It's just not that India needs the world. So it's a two-way thing. So all these issues are there. They're up in the air. Um, to be very honest, at this point of time, we don't know which side the cookie will crumble or harden up. So I would like you to hazard a guess, sir, and look into it before we can take some questions from everyone. Over to you, sir.
Okay, so uh, the bottom line is India is following a multi-alignment policy, and multi-alignment policy basically means is that India is not putting its all eggs in one basket. India is conscious of the fact is that there are limitations to our relationship with the United States. We thought we had a certain degree of equations, but rightly so, we remain member of SEO. We have been an encouraging member of BRICS. And in terms of economic issues, etc., we are expanding our trade partnerships. We might suffer, but like I said, I try to explain in my talk, the United States is conscious of the fact is that if there is a major power in Asia, other than China and the United States, it is India, which has the capacity, the capability, and a commitment to play a balancing role. It is that balancing role which the Americans understand, and they realize that. But the point at this particular point time is this: is that there is a single-eyed focus of the United States administration of secure trade benefits from India, primarily on the basis of a notion that exists in the minds of the commerce and economic leadership of the Americans, that trade deficit with vis-a-vis the United States is something which the Americans are suffering, and is because at the American behest, and that is not acceptable. So the countries must open up their economies. The issue from our perspective is this: is that yes, America is one of the major economies. It's also our service economy. But as likely you rightly said, the choices for the American business class, the American top industries, technological innovators, is that they have to invest in Indian talent. So Indian talent exists both in India as well as in America, and then that's why we see these global centers coming up in India. We see these digital investments coming up in India. So somewhere down the line, I personally believe there is an understanding within the American establishment that we have a limit to how far can we go in pushing India, and there has to be a deal. Uh, what kind of a deal? We don't know. But what has happened is there is too much of psychological damage which has been done. Damage at people to people level has been done. Immigration has become such an issue. The Indians are being being hounded in America. Is a communal kind of a violence which is being in the United States. So under these circumstances, it is not likely that things will come back to normal, but they can improve. But the start point of that would have to be that United States has to make up a mind what kind of relationship it wants, and the sign of that mind would be lower than 20% trade tariff on India, lifting of 25% of coercive tariff vis-a-vis Russia, and bringing down overall tariff to 15 to 18%. That will be the first sign. Number two, controlling the rhetoric within his own country, which I believe will start happening sooner than later, because as he starts to face midterm, is already facing challenges. Third is the issue is that India have to acknowledge the fact that while India will manage sea lines of communications, manage its oceanic waters, manage its oceanic space, it will also manage its continental space, but it will manage on terms that India wants to do it, which India wants to do it, and in that India will seek partnerships in terms of technological and capacities, but these will be a transactional relationships. It will not be any kind of some kind of a giveaway to India. It's not. No, it will not be. India, therefore, India is not. Important point to note as we end the year is India is not on the back foot. India has multiple options. India has got multiple economic options. It has got multiple manufacturing options. It's got multiple technological options. We have the capacity, we have the capability. And I think one of the good things that have happened to India as a result of what has happened in the relations with the US is that it spurred the animal spirit in India in terms of manufacturing, startups, technological thing, and get on with the job of building up India. That's something sometimes we were lackadaisical about. As far as our immediate relationships are concerned, and the Americans are playing the role, they are being foolish. They are being foolish because it will not gain them any advantage. I mean, they cannot change issues in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is only utilizing American and American leverages primarily for the trade in markets, because they are they control the entire trade of cloth and textiles and other this thing, and that's why they have an influence. As far as the Pakistanis are concerned, they are fishing in troubled waters, fully realizing that it will not mature very much. They do not have the capacities and capabilities. Jamaat and all are all issues that are there. They are a
Yeah,
pain.
we'll handle them.
We can handle. So, bottom line at the end of the day is my message is very simple. There is much to gain in building up a credible working relationship. I'm afraid because of the events of 2025, it will take a couple of years to come back to the normal, but it will remain transactional. But we need to ensure that we remain engaged and on terms that are acceptable to both sides. There will be no one-way ticket to the United States anymore. That's what I'd like
Yeah.
to say.
Thanks a lot, sir. There'll be no one-way ticket to United States anymore. Right. With this, I'd like to, I mean, this to everyone. I'd like to take a step back from all this discussion, and I'll explain something else, which is macro, as we have finished the year, and then we'll take questions. In 2020, uh, China came into Eastern Ladakh with the hope of forcing a solution on India to its benefit. In the next 4 years, like I explained, it has strategically lost India. On the LAC, the things are coming to a point where they are on the back foot. Okay, people will say Pakistan, China has got a huge, what shall I say, force. They're better equipped. They're better everything. The equipment is more. Their infrastructure is more. All that, but incrementally that is changing. And it's my personal belief that today China is fixed on the LAC and they can't take anything out of the LAC. And this is happening as they're eyeing Taiwan more seriously. This is happening as their economy is going down. This is happening as their demography has irretrievably gone down. In this intermediate period, India's economy has gone up and all capacities in India have gone up. 4 years back, I wouldn't have thought of it. Why am I talking of this? In 2025, something significant has happened in a similar manner in the US India equation. Till 25 beginning, there was a perception that India is dependent on USA. Today, suddenly people are realizing we are not that dependent. There might be tariffs, the imports have gone up. There might be all this nonsense which Mr. Trump is doing. Despite that, our economy has gone up. There might be many other things which are happening, but we are still firing intercontinental ballistic missiles and sovereign launched ballistic missiles. A shift has happened. If the first shift happened in 2020 strategically in India, I see the second shift happening now. And my bottom dollar, which I'm going to bet on, is 2026 is going to be a year of India's strategic shift. It's going to happen. Right? It's a matter of time. I mean, and that time is now, and that it's going to happen. And you will also see that the way things are happening in USA. I'm talking of USA. There's a lot of movement against Indian tech over there. If Indians and Indian tech are taken out of America and they come back to India, there'll be a role reversal, which is already being paved by tech companies in. Like I said, they can't go to China, they can't go to Vietnam, they can't go to Bangladesh, they can't go. Tech needs stability, tech needs brains, which is not there everywhere else in scale. So I think we will see a far different India in 2024. And like what Brigadier Arun Sahgal said, we have to be engaged with USA, but we have to take care of our interests first.